Hello and welcome. I am Excellite and this is my channel. Tonight I'm going to be telling you a story. It's a true story. And I have debated telling this story for a long time. The reason was that it received a lot of media attention, so it's possible that you've heard this story or seen videos on YouTube about it. But I want to tell it because, to me, this is the epitome of what true fear would look like. And I don't think that anybody can hear this story without feeling a deep sense of dread. It's terrifying and it's strange. So I'm going to tell you about the Watcher. Let's get started. Derek Broaddus and his wife Maria and their 3 children had purchased a dream home. This was the home that they were going to live in forever. They were going to raise their children and they were going to have their grandkids come back to this very home. Maria had grown up just a couple of blocks away from this house. She loved it. Derek had grown up in a middle-class family in Maine, and he loved this house. There were 3 fireplaces, and the kids from the get-go were discussing which fireplace Santa was going to come through on Christmas Eve night, and they were happy. Derek had moved his way up the ladder at an insurance company in Manhattan to become a senior vice president. He started earning a very large salary, which afforded them the ability to buy their dream home. They didn't think their life could get better until one June day in 2014. It was early evening, and Derek Broaddus had just finished painting in his new home. He went outside to check the mail. It was early evening, and Derek had spent the day painting inside of his new home on 657 Boulevard. They had just closed on this home 3 days earlier. And he went out to get the mail because they had not been living there. Most of the mail was generally ads or something about, home security, sprinkler systems, windows. Anybody who's ever bought a new house knows that right away those types of businesses are at your door. Or sometimes mail from previous owners. But when Derek went out to get the mail, it was addressed in thick, clunky handwriting to the new owner. And the type note inside began warmly. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. And so Derek continued reading the letter, which suddenly took a turn. How did you end up here? The writer asked. Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within? Then the letter went on. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of this house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. The author had apparently already begun watching the house. The letter identified the Broaddus's Honda minivan, as well as the workers renovating the home. I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it is supposed to be, the person wrote. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy, said the author of the letter. Earlier in the week, Derek and Maria had gone to the house and had been chatting with their new neighbors. Their children, who were ages 5, 8, and 10 years old, began running around the backyard with the neighbor kids. The letter writer seemed to have noticed this, and they wrote, "You have children. I have seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have counted," the anonymous correspondent wrote, before asking if there were more on the way. And the letter went on. "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." Of course, the envelope had no return address, but it was written, "Who am I?" And then there are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am in one. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. Look out any of the many windows in 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day, and maybe I am one. Then the letter was coming to an end, and it was suggesting that this would not be the last letter. "Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin," followed by a signature typed in cursive font. The Watcher. It was dark outside, and Derek Broaddus was alone. He raced around the house and he turned off all the lights so that nobody could see inside. Then he called the police department. An officer came to the house, read the letter, and said, "What the F is this?" He asked Derek if he had any enemies. He recommended moving a piece of construction equipment from the back porch in case the Watcher tried to toss it through a window. Their happy move into their beautiful new home, their new life, starting in this house where they were going to raise their children, and turned into something of a nightmare. Or would it? Was this a one-off? Was this a prank? They could hope that, right? Derek, shaken, obviously, left and went to his wife and children as fast as he could. They were still in their old home while the renovations were being done. And that night, Derek and Maria wrote an email to John and Andrea Woods, the couple who sold them 657 Boulevard, to ask if they had any idea who the Watcher might be or why he or she had written. "I asked the Woods to bring me young blood, and it looks like they listened," had been written in the letter. Andrea Woods replied the next morning. She said that a few days before moving out, they had also received a letter from the Watcher. The note had been odd, she said, and made similar mention of the Watcher's family observing the home. But Andrea said that she and her husband had never received anything like it in their 23 years in the house. And she had thrown the letter away, thinking it was just a strange joke. That day, the Woodses went with Maria to the police station, where Detective Leonard Lugo told her not to tell anyone about the letters, including her new neighbors, most of whom she had never met, all of whom were now suspects. The Broadduses spent the coming weeks on high alert. Derek canceled work trips, and whenever Maria took the kids to their new house, She would yell their names if they wandered into the corner of the yard. When Derek gave a tour of the renovation to a couple on the block, he froze when the wife said, "It'll be nice to have some young blood in the neighborhood." The Broaddus' general contractor arrived one morning to find a heavy sign he'd hammered into the front yard had been ripped out overnight. And 2 weeks went by. Maria stopped by the house one day to look at some paint samples and to check the mail. She recognized the thick black lettering on a card-shaped envelope and called the police. It read, "Welcome again to your new home at 657 Boulevard," the watcher wrote. "The workers have been very busy, and I have been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time, they will." This time, the watcher had addressed Derek and Maria directly, misspelling their names as Mr. and Mrs. Broaddus. Had the watcher been close enough to hear one of the Broaddus' contractors addressing them? The watcher boasted of having learned a lot about the family in the preceding weeks, especially about their children. The letter identified the Broaddus' 3 kids by birth order and even by their nicknames, the ones Maria had been yelling. "I am pleased to know your names now and the names of the young bloods you have brought to me," it said. "You certainly say their names often." The letter asked about one child in particular, whom the writer had seen using an easel inside an enclosed porch. "Is she the artist of the family?" it asked. The letter continued, 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of this house. Have you found all of the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Will they sleep in the attic, or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It'll help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on, and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now you are too, Broaddus family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the past 3 families to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know I will be watching. This chilled Derek and Maria to the bone. They stopped bringing their children to the home, and they weren't even sure that they were going to move in. Several weeks later, a 3rd letter arrived. Where have you gone to? The watcher wrote. 657 Boulevard is missing you. So, let's talk about Westfield, New Jersey, where this family lived. The people who live there call it a modern-day Mayberry. It's fit for the Andrew Griffith Show, they say. The kind of place where a new neighbor might greet you with a welcoming note. Westfield is 45 minutes from New York, and it's a bit too slow for singles, meaning the town's 30,000 residents are largely well-to-do families. In 2018, Bloomberg ranked Westfield as the 99th richest city in America. but only the 18th wealthiest in New Jersey. And in 2014, when the Watcher struck, the website Neighborhood Scout named it the country's 30th safest town. The most pressing local issues seem to be things like the Trader Joe's being temporarily closed because the roof collapsed, and the rampant scourge of unconstitutional policing, by which they meant aggressive parking enforcement. One activity that all the locals seem to view as treacherous is trying to buy a home in this area. One resident who wants to be anonymous was quoted as saying, "There's a lot of money and a lot of ego. I've seen bidding wars where friends lost by $300,000. That's not really close, is it? The Broaddus' house was on the Boulevard, a wide, tree-lined street with some of the most desirable homes in town, as the Watcher had noted. The Boulevard used to be the street to live on. You made it if you lived on the Boulevard. 657 Boulevard had been built in 1905 and was largely considered to be the grandest of all the homes on the block when the Woodses had put it on the market. They had received multiple offers above their asking price even. That led the Broadduses to initially suspect that the Watcher might be someone who was upset over losing out on the house. But the Woodses said one interested buyer had backed out after a bad medical diagnosis, while another had already found a home somewhere else. In an email to the Broadduses, Andrea Woods proposed another theory. Would the mention of the contractor trucks and your children suggest that it was someone in the neighborhood? The letters did seem to indicate a close proximity. I mean, if they could hear them yelling for their children in the backyard, unless they were standing out by the backyard all day long, which feels like somebody would notice, perhaps they were hearing it from their own backyard. Anyway, the letters had been processed in Kearney, the U.S. Postal Service's distribution center in North New Jersey. The first was postmarked on June 4th, which is odd because that was before the sale was made public. And the Woodses had never put up a for sale sign in their yard. But then the letter came after only one day of the contractors being there. The renovations were mostly interior, and people who lived nearby say they didn't notice an unusual commotion, even when the jackhammering in the basement started. When Derek and Maria walked Detective Lugo around the house, they showed him the easel on the porch, and it was hidden from the street by bushes and trees, making it very difficult to see unless someone was behind the house or right next door. A few days after the first letter, Maria and Derek went to a barbecue across the street. It was in their honor and another family who had just moved into the block. The Broadduses hadn't told anyone about the Watcher because the police had instructed them not to, so they found themselves scanning the party for clues while also keeping tabs on their kids, who ran in between all of the adults who were basically their suspect pool. Maria said, "We kept screaming at them to stay close. People must have thought we were absolutely crazy." At one point during the party, Derek was talking with a man named John Schmidt. John lived 2 doors down. John began to tell him about the Langfords. The Langfords lived between them. Peggy Langford was in her 90s, and several of her adult children, all of them in their 60s, lived with her. The family was a bit odd, John said, but harmless. He described one of the younger Langfords, Michael, who didn't work and had a beard like Ernest Hemingway, as kind of a Boo Radley type character. So Derek thought, case solved. The Langford house was right next to the easel on the porch. The family had lived there since the 1960s when the watcher's father, as according to the letter, had begun observing 657 Boulevard, Richard Langford, the family patriarch, had died 12 years earlier, and the current watcher claimed to have been on the job for the better part of 2 decades. When the Broadduses told Lugo about the family, he told them that he already knew, and a week after the first letter had arrived, he had already taken Michael Langford to the police headquarters for an interview. Michael denied knowing anything about the letters. The Broadduses say that Lugo told them the narrative of what he said matched many things mentioned in the letters. "This isn't CSI Westfield," Lugo later told the Broadduses. "When the wife is dead, it's the husband." However, there really wasn't much hard evidence, and after a few weeks, the police chief told the Broadduses that, short of an admission, there wasn't much they could do. "This is someone who threatened my kids, and the police are saying, probably nothing's gonna happen," Derek was quoted. He said, "Probably isn't good enough for me." After the second letter, Derek told the cops that if they didn't take care of the situation, they would have a different kind of case on their hands. "This person attacked my family, and where I'm from, if you do that, you get your ass beat," Derek's quoted as saying. Frustrated, the Broadduses began their own investigation. And this is where we come to the end of part 1. I really hope that you are finding this interesting. And if you are, please come back. Please give this video a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please do so. And if you ring that bell, you'll be notified as soon as my content goes live, so you'll know the second part 2 hits, which will be very, very soon. Thank you, and good night.